Another big commitment is in for Dan Lanning and the Ducks. We're talking about the latest All-American that's heading to Eugene. And we're back like we never left. Oregon fans, what's going on? How we living? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. Just in case you're new here, I'm your host, Max Torres, publisher and lead editor of Ducks Digest, covering the Oregon Ducks over on Fan Nation, part of the Sports Illustrated Network. Thank you for tuning in to another big breaking news episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. Wherever you're watching or listening, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Share the show so we can continue growing this awesome Duck community on YouTube. So, breaking news, 2024 Yelm, Washington linebacker Brayden Platt has committed to the University of Oregon. Platt chose the Ducks over fellow finalist Oklahoma as Dan Lanning and the Ducks score a key recruiting win over Brent Venables and the Sooners. This comes on Monday evening with Platt announcing his commitment to the Ducks, opting to stay in the Pacific Northwest to play his college ball in Eugene. It's been a little bit quiet on the recruiting trail for the Ducks lately, wouldn't you say? Well, we knew that this was kind of the direction that Oregon had been going. And if you've been reading my stuff over on Ducks Digest, listening to the Ducks Dish podcast, you had a feeling that this one just might have been coming. So we're going to be breaking this commitment down from every angle, as we always do. So super excited to get into this news. Always love talking about the latest developments for Oregon on the recruiting trail, especially after a nice win over Portland State over the weekend. So let's see where we can start with this one. I think this first point is one that we keep coming back to over and over again. Dan Lanning and Oregon football are raiding the state of Washington for top talent yet again. Brayden Platt joins Fox Crater as one of Washington's premier players that is heading to Eugene to play their college football. What we know about Platt, looking over at the ratings on 247 Sports, according to the composite, he is a 4-star recruit, 0.9249, ranked the number 191 player in the country, number 15 linebacker, and the number 3 recruit in the state of Washington. So I really like this move by the Ducks because not only do I really like Platt as a player, there's always storylines within the commitment, within the recruitment, and I always like to dig into them. So the big thing here, the Pacific Northwest isn't really that respected on a national scale when you're talking about recruiting, when you're talking about high school football talent. But Washington, they're steadily on the incline as they keep putting out more and more players every year. I think the two biggest ones right now might be playing in the Big Ten in Emeka Egbuka and JT Tuimoloau at Ohio State. So those are two big names that recently came out of the state of Washington. And Brayden Platt looks like he's going to be the next big one on the defensive side of the ball. But for Oregon, they're a school that has to recruit nationally. We've known this for so long. But just because you have to recruit nationally, that doesn't mean that you look past not your own backyard in this case, of course, but the Pacific Northwest, your region. If you have guys in your region that you think are capable of contributing to your program at a high level, maybe someday developing into starters, you go after and you get those guys. And that's exactly what Oregon did here with Brayden Platt. The story with Platt's recruitment is a fun one. Oregon was in very early in his recruitment, especially when you compare it to Oklahoma. Platt started to get some pretty big offers coming off of his junior year, and Oklahoma was a much newer offer compared to Oregon. So I think part of what you see here is that loyalty, that early faith in Platt's abilities really paying off for the Ducks in a big way on the recruiting trail. Platt has taken numerous visits out to Oregon, obviously not too far of a trip from the state of Washington. So the Ducks do have geography on their side in this one. and they're taking advantage of a really solid state of Washington as far as 2024 recruits go. So, like I said, Oregon was really in on this one for a long time. Really strong relationships, with Dan Lanning, with Coach Michalowski, Brian Michalowski, the new linebackers coach. Also had a good relationship with Jake Long, the former inside linebackers coach at Oregon, who is now at the University of Alabama, reuniting with Nick Saban and the Tide for the 2023 season. So I think Oregon was always in a good spot here because they had him on campus so long, so many times. They have so many good connections as far as relationships go. They have geography on their side. Another thing that is worth mentioning is their connection and relationship with Team FSP, Ford Sports Performance, a premier 7-on-7 training program and training facility in the state of Washington. I've gotten to get eyes on Brayden Platt myself in person a couple times at some 7-on-7 tournaments out here in Southern California in the spring, and also at the Elite 11 when Platt was out in when Platt was out in Southern California as well. So I think that just seeing the work that Oregon's put in with Platt really pay off in a big way, I think is something that Duck fans should be excited about. And what's even more interesting with this recruitment is that I think track might have been part of what put the Ducks over the top here for Brayden Platt. Brayden Platt is a phenomenal athlete, and he does a lot of different things in track. He sprints. I want to say he does javelin. So not only are you getting a premier football player, you're getting one of the best overall track and field athletes, I would say, probably in the country. I do admittedly need to do more research on track and probably more specifically with Platt, but that's kind of what I know as far as what he brings to the table. So I think Oregon just really checked all of the boxes here for Braden Platt, whether you're looking for closeness or distance to home, his family being able to come see his games every weekend, the strong relationships with the coaching staff, the path to having a really successful college career and ultimately getting developed for the NFL. I think that Oregon checked all of those boxes for Braden Platt. And another little juicy storyline in this one is that they get a big recruiting win over Oklahoma. And I know this one's got to feel good for Oregon fans, seeing that they lost out on Peyton Bowen, a premier safety out of Texas in the 2023 recruiting class, who flipped from Notre Dame to Oregon out of nowhere, it felt like, during the early national signing period. And then he took a little bit of time to think about it and decided that he acted too fast and ended up in Norman, and now he's playing for the Sooners. So I think Oklahoma is probably a top 10 recruiting power nationally. So for Oregon to be able to beat out the Sooners, who are also led by a defensive-minded head coach. We all know the story with Brent Venables. Not a whole lot of success in 2022, his first year with the Sooners as their head coach, coming over from Clemson after being an elite defensive coordinator under Dabo Swinney. So I think this is another part of this recruitment that makes it this commitment that makes it that much more of a statement for the Ducks with Brayden Platt. So let's hop into some eval, because if you don't know about Brayden Platt, I'm going to tell you about what kind of a football player the Ducks are getting. If you're watching me on YouTube, we have some film up on the screen. That's right, Brayden Platt's first highlight on his junior season highlights come out of the backfield as Platt doubles as a running back for his high school, for Yelm. The Tornadoes, I want to say, is their mascot. But man, what's there not to like about Platt on film? I think you see an explosive guy, someone who plays with a mean streak that you want in your linebacking core. I mean, that's just back-to-back plays that are just absolutely leveling guys. I like his lateral quickness here, just absolutely destroying the blockers in his path. Granted, like I kind of mentioned, it is Washington, and more specifically in his area, I don't think he's facing maybe the premier talent in the state on a week-to-week basis. I think more of that talent's probably closer to the Seattle area, and that's not where Yelm is, but just ripped off a 70-yard touchdown run there like it was absolutely nothing. So you're getting, like I said, with the track stuff, a premier athlete if you're Oregon and you're wondering what you're getting here. And your newest commit linebacker, Brayden Platt. He's listed at 6'2", 240 pounds. And the center of gravity that he plays with, the explosiveness that he has, the short area burst, the acceleration, let's just call it what it is, you guys. There's not a lot of linebackers that are doing or can do what Brayden Platt does on probably a weekly basis. I think that he brings added value to this room, to this linebacker core for the Ducks as someone who has experience playing running back, kind of like what we see with corners that play receiver and receivers that play corner. You have some of that knowledge of the other positions, so you kind of know how it functions a bit more. You know what some of those tendencies are, and I think it's just going to make him a more effective and more valuable defender for Oregon here in the 2024 class. So just the way that he moves, I think, is really what stands out to me. It's crazy that we're watching this many offensive highlights for a linebacker that's going to be going to Oregon for his college ball. But I think that he honestly really kind of fits the mold of some of these other linebackers that the Ducks have committed here in their 2024 class. And if you don't know about Oregon's 2024 class, you already have a couple of other linebackers committed in Long Beach Poly's Dylan Williams and Los Alamitos linebacker Kamar Matudi. Interesting side note about those two recruitments. They both came down to Oregon and Michigan State, but the Ducks were able to win that head-to-head battle over the Spartans, which really seems fitting, seeing that the Ducks are going to be probably facing the Spartans a bit more now that they're heading out to Big Ten country starting in the 2024 season. So Oregon's linebacker haul now, you got Dylan Williams, Kamar Matudi, and now Brayden Platt. And what sticks out about those guys is that they're kind of similar in some ways. I think that Platt might be the most explosive guy of this bunch. I really like both Dylan Williams and Kamar Matudi, but I really like the explosion that you see Platt play with. Just isn't afraid to stick his nose in the action here. And I think that Oregon, with this group of linebackers that they have verbally committed here, they're doing their due diligence. They're doing their homework for trying to address the needs in this recruiting class. Because if you guys remember, linebacker was kind of the position that I thought the Ducks, I wouldn't want to say missed on or, did poorly on in 2023, but they only signed one true linebacker from the high school ranks in Sacred Heart Cathedral linebacker Jerry Mixon. And I really like him, and I love the kind of athlete he is. And we're talking about versatility here with Brayden Platt. Jerry Mixon played linebacker, rushed off the edge. He played some running back, even played a little bit of quarterback for the Irish at Sacred Heart Cathedral in San Francisco, California. And I think that Platt, Williams, Matudi, that they all have those similar traits to their game. They're all phenomenal athletes. They're guys that can play sideline to sideline and really cover. They can move. They're explosive. They're physical. They all like contact. And I think that this group might be doing the best job when you consider, like I said, filling those gaps and what Oregon kind of struggled with a year ago. Their linebacker play wasn't that great. So how do you fix that? You try to coach them up a little bit better, but you also go out and you get good players, whether that's from the transfer portal or whether that's from the high school ranks. So I think that that's definitely what Dan Lanning, Brian Michalowski, Tosh Lupoi, and the rest of this Oregon coaching staff is doing with Brayden Platt by adding another really, really good athlete to the mix in their defense here in 2024. So I think that, especially when you consider kind of I don't know if I'd say heartbreaker, but the bummer that was Justin Williams, the 5-star linebacker out of Conroe, Texas, Oak Ridge High School. He was down to Oregon and Georgia, and he decided that he was going to be going to the SEC to play for Kirby Smart and the back-to-back defending national champion Georgia Bulldogs. Man, that pick would have been crazy if he went to Oregon. It would have been just break the internet type of win, but considering that you missed out on him, I do still have him as one of Oregon's top flip candidates, but probably not looking super likely just because he's committed to Georgia and because his teammate, Joseph Jonah Ajonye, a 5-star defensive lineman, also out of Oak Ridge High School, he's committed to the Bulldogs as well. So you figure it's probably going to be a little hard to get him to budge off of his commitment, but I really, really like this linebacker haul for the Ducks. I think that they pretty much are done at linebacker in 2024 now. So they're sitting in a great spot. Now they're up to 23 verbal commitments in the 2024 cycle. And I think that they're in an awesome spot with the season just having kicked off. And now you can kind of focus on some of those premium position kind of guys and just some of those top targets that are still on your big board. So with that being said, maybe we talk a little bit about what's next for Oregon, because we always want to talk about how great things are in the moment with guys committing to your school and whatnot. But the question quickly becomes, what's next now that the Ducks have a commitment in Brayden Platt and the space is getting less and less? They're getting less and less space. They're running out of space here in this class. So I think what's next for Oregon, we don't have any commitment dates as of right now that we know of, but we do have some pretty big names that we know we are tracking, starting in my neck of the woods in Southern California. You have 5-star offensive tackle Brandon Baker from Santa Ana Mater Dei. I'm still feeling okay about my pick for Oregon there. I'm not going to move it just yet. He said he's probably looking to announce maybe sometime this month. When I last talked to him earlier on, when he started off his high school season against Corona Centennial, you have Oregon in the mix there, and Texas and Nebraska and Ohio State. So the Ducks are going to Tennessee is another school that he mentioned. So those schools are not going to make it easy for Oregon to ultimately land Brandon Baker. And he's going to be taking an official visit out to Nebraska later on this month. So I think the Cornhuskers are certainly still in the thick of this recruitment. But I think that Texas is the biggest school that you got to watch for with Brandon Baker. The priority now for Oregon, I think, is getting him on campus before his commitment for an official visit, to really just try to drive this thing home and say, hey, we need you here in Eugene. But as of right now, I feel like it's as open as it's ever been for another school to come in and take Brandon Baker away from the Ducks. And he's not committed to the Ducks, so it's not like, maybe that's not the best way to say it, but there was an opening that was created. Like I've said, when Adrian Clem took that job, I think Baker was ready to hop in, but Adrian Clem's departure to the NFL, I think, really served as a pause, served as a reset for this recruitment with 5-star offensive tackle Brandon Baker. So that's kind of the latest that we're hearing right now. Texas, I would say, is the main threat for Brandon Baker as far as Oregon recruiting him. You also have Aiden Breland, a 5-star defensive lineman for the Ducks. We know that the Ducks are heavily involved with the Mater Dei star, 5-star Mater Dei defensive lineman Aiden Breland. He's probably going to be putting Oregon in his top schools very soon. I think that the Ducks are really at the forefront of that recruitment, especially with the way that they've prioritized Southern California, but also just with the way that they're prioritizing bringing in difference makers along the defensive line. I think they've always done a great job with their offensive line, but the defensive line is where they've really needed to bring in some elite guys consistently and in consecutive classes to try to raise the bar there along the defensive line. And I think Aiden Breland is probably arguably the top target that the Ducks are still going after here in the 2024 cycle. Then you have Jason Brown Jr. talking about the state of Washington. He is the best offensive player in the state in 2024. He goes to Seattle O'Dea High School out there in Seattle. So this is a guy that is in Husky territory. I guess the top offensive player would be Ascendria Fua, who committed to Texas A&M. But as far as playmaker, Jason Brown Jr. is where it's at. And O'Dea is consistently, routinely, historically a top power in Washington. I got a buddy of mine that I met at Gonzaga, also in Washington, that went to O'Dea. So Sam, if you're watching this, shout out to you, buddy. But yeah, Jason Brown Jr., he hasn't announced any new commitment dates of yet. He is working from a top 3 of Oregon, Michigan State, and Washington. And I love the Ducks' chances there. But we'll see if they want to go for another prep running back or if they maybe want to weigh their options in the transfer portal after the end of the 2023 season. A couple more names that are worth keeping an eye on here for Oregon as they work to fill out their 2024 class. You got Solomon Williams, a 4-star edge rusher out of Carrollwood Day High School in Tampa, Florida. This is a guy that Oregon's really been, I think, gaining ground with. There's been a lot of social media buzz. He took a visit out to Oregon. So Oregon's right there with your Alabamas, and he's basically got every offer in the book. So if Alik Terry and Tony Tuioti can push into the Sunshine State, I say Alik Terry because he's from Florida. We all know that by now. I think that Solomon Williams can really probably is their main remaining target at edge rusher after missing out on Elijah Rushing, after missing out on Jordan Ross earlier on in the summer in the 24 class. So you kind of gotta shift things and shuffle your pieces around a little bit every now and then. So I think Solomon Williams definitely got to be a priority guy for the Ducks. We'll keep you posted on any updates there. And then you also have junior college corner Sione Laulea out of College of San Mateo. Really like him. Long, physical, fast defensive back corner. Definitely a premium position. Oregon's looking for that lockdown guy that can help the team go forward, not only following the departure of Christian Gonzalez, because they have to go the whole 23 season without Christian Gonzalez, but keep bringing elite defensive backs to Eugene. I think that is crucial if Oregon wants to keep moving in the direction of being, and if they can do it this year, maintaining themselves as an elite defense in the Big Ten now moving forward, right? Because we're in the 24 class, so Oregon's going to be in the Big Ten by the time these guys get on campus. I think another guy worth watching is Jericho Johnson, big 4-star, 6'4", 300-pound defensive lineman out of Fairfield, California, Armijo High School. He's taken a visit to the Ducks, but I feel like he's pretty buttoned up when it comes to recruiting interviews. So it's kind of hard to get too much information on that recruitment, but I think Oregon's got a chance. NorCal, Tosh Lapoy, you can kind of connect the dots there. I think that they have a great chance there, but we'll see what ultimately ends up happening. But just to kind of start winding down things a little bit, I really, really like this Brayden Platt pickup for Oregon. I predicted it back in July. I know I wasn't the first one to make that prediction, but I felt really good about the pick. So nice to put another feather in my cap as far as predicting these guys and them ultimately landing at Oregon. I think they're in a great spot that you're just getting the season going. You have your linebackers figured out. You probably have your corners figured out with Ifeoma Badegu and Dakota Fields. I think Laulea would be a bonus. You have safety figured out with Flowers and Kingston Lopa. You have a lot of really good pieces along the O-line already. I think you still got a little bit of work to do at wide receiver if you're Junior Adams working in this cycle. You already have your quarterbacks in the fold. Can't overstate how important that is. Love Will Stein getting that done early. And then you also have some defensive linemen that you're looking for. So I think that Oregon's in a really good spot because they don't have any glaring needs now and they can focus on the on-field product as they turn the page and now have to get ready for Texas Tech. So overall, the Ducks are doing a really good job. I think that they've kind of been lurking a little bit quietly, and maybe that's what they want to do. Maybe they don't want to be attracting that much attention or that much buzz on the recruiting trail here in the 24 class. Because maybe it'll make it that much cooler when they hopefully get some splashy guys, right? They're definitely hoping to get some more big names in this class. I think Breland is the top guy. Breland and Laulea have to be those top two guys, I would say, that the Ducks are really going after. Probably Roger Saliapaga is another interesting guy. I talked about him on my Friday episode of the Mailbag live stream. Roger Saliapaga, the Utah wide receiver / tight end. I think he's someone that Oregon's still involved with. So kind of just getting into this Brayden Platt commitment, giving you my thoughts on it. I love this commitment, this huge pickup for the Ducks. Just awesome do-it-all linebacker, and I think he fits in perfectly with the other linebackers that the Ducks have in the fold in Dylan Williams and Kamar Matudi. So the linebacker spot, I think, was definitely a big question mark as far as recruiting goes after the Ducks kind of left a little bit to be desired in the 23 recruiting cycle. So what do they do to follow it up? They sign two All-Americans in Kamar Matudi and Brayden Platt. I don't know if Dylan Williams has All-American status, but either way, three very quality 4-star guys. I think that they're all going to be kind of in the mix to at least be really competitive for some playing time as true freshmen. I think it's a little bit hard to project what their roles are maybe going to be. I know that Dylan Williams plays at a really storied program in Long Beach Poly, really good coaches over there. So Dylan Williams and Kamar Matudi might be a little bit more battle tested by the time they get to Eugene, just because they're playing higher competition, or better competition, I should say. But at the same time, that doesn't necessarily shoo them in to edge out a guy like Brayden Platt if these guys are all competing for potential starting jobs here once they get to Eugene to play for the Ducks come 2024. So Brayden Platt is going to be heading to Eugene to play his college ball as the Ducks go into Washington to snag another elite prospect yet again. Dan Lanning and the Ducks get some good momentum, probably some momentum that they needed here in the 24 cycle. But that's going to do it for me on this episode of the Ducks Dish Podcast. Appreciate you guys tuning in wherever you're tuned in, whether you're listening, whether you're watching. Appreciate you taking your time out of your day to talk some Ducks, talk some Duck Cruton with me. Couple of favors before we get out of here. Super important that you guys follow me on the socials at mtorres sports on Twitter and Instagram. I'm on YouTube. You can find my channel at Oregon Football Max Torres. And then you can also read all of my written work and plenty on this Brayden Platt commitment over on ducksdigest.com. And then do me a favor and share the Ducks Dish podcast with your friends, with your family, and with other Duck fans. Just trying to build this community and run these numbers up. So greatly appreciate you guys tuning in, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Ducks Dish podcast.